The gym was quiet that night. Not silent, but quiet in the way only empty places become after people leave. The kind of quiet where every sound feels louder than it should. A mop dragging across rubber mats, a distant hum from the fluorescent lights, the faint echo of footsteps in a room built for impact. Most people had already gone home. The mirrors reflected empty space. The heavy bags hung still. The sweat, the effort, the ego, all of it had already been wrung out of the room. In the far corner, a janitor cleaned the mats. No audience, no spotlight, no one paying attention. And no one, absolutely no one, had any idea who he really was. His name was Bayani. He wore a faded janitorial uniform, fabric softened by time, colors dulled by countless washes. The sleeves were slightly frayed at the cuffs, threads unraveling in places no one ever looked closely enough to notice. His shoes were worn thin from years of walking the same floors, heels scuffed, soles flattened by repetition rather than neglect. For almost 3 years, this had been his routine, not a temporary job, not a phase, not something he was passing through. This was his schedule, his structure, his quiet agreement with the world. He arrived after the last class ended, when the echoes of shouted commands and striking pads still lingered faintly in the air. When sweat clung to the mats and the room exhaled from the effort of the day. He left before the first students arrived in the morning, before the doors opened, before the mirrors filled with movement again. Most of the people who trained there never once saw him arrive, and never once saw him leave. Always unseen, always unnoticed. Most members didn't even know his name. They passed him without looking, stepped around his bucket without acknowledging it, nodded, if they nodded at all. To them, he wasn't a person with a story. He was part of the environment, like the lockers lining the wall, like the fluorescent lights overhead, like the mats beneath their feet, essential, ever-present, and completely taken for granted. Bayani didn't mind, or at least he never showed that he did. He worked quietly, never interrupting conversations, never asking anyone to move, never reminding them that he was there. Methodically, with the same care every single night. Each section of the gym was cleaned in the same order, the pattern fixed, the sequence unchanging. Corners first, then the center, then the edges again, because discipline lived in repetition. Each movement was controlled, measured, intentional. Each stroke of the mop followed through fully, no shortcuts, no half-efforts. He didn't rush to finish early, and he never dragged the work out. Not hurried, not careless, just precise. There was a rhythm to it. The steady glide of the mop, the shift of weight from one foot to the other, the subtle pivot of his hips when he turned, the way his shoulders stayed, relaxed even after hours on his feet. It was the rhythm of someone who understood balance, timing, efficiency. A rhythm learned from years of discipline, years spent listening to a different kind of silence, on different floors, under very different lights. Though no one noticed. No one ever does. That night, one person was still inside the gym. Trent, a third-degree black belt, one of the gym's most respected instructors, the kind of fighter students spoke about with quiet admiration, the kind whose name carried weight without needing explanation. He wasn't just skilled, he was proven. Tournament wins, years of competition, hundreds of students taught, corrected, shaped. Technique was his language, discipline his reputation. He had just finished a brutal private session, 2 full hours of pad work. No shortcuts, no easy rounds. Hard combinations drilled until they were instinct. Footwork pushed until his calves burned. Defense sharpened through repetition and fatigue. The kind of training that leaves your lungs heavy and your muscles trembling, but your mind clear. His arms burned. His shoulders felt thick with lactic acid. His legs ached in that deep, satisfying way that told him he'd earned the fatigue. This was the exhaustion he trusted, the kind that came after progress. Everything had clicked that night. Timing felt effortless, footwork smooth and responsive, power clean, controlled, deliberate. Nothing sloppy, nothing forced. Every strike had landed exactly where he intended. Every movement had flowed into the next without hesitation. He felt good. More than good. Confident. The kind of confidence that settles into your chest quietly, not loud or arrogant, but steady, earned through repetition and proof. As he toweled off, sweat dripping from his hair and jawline, he let his breathing slow, let the room come back into focus. And that's when he glanced across the gym and saw Bayani. Same place, same corner, same mop, moving back and forth across the mats. The same quiet routine he had seen dozens of times before. But this time, something didn't sit right. Not wrong, just different. Trent watched for a moment longer than usual, the way Bayani turned without breaking rhythm, the way his feet repositioned smoothly with each pass, the way his balance never seemed compromised even while working. It was subtle, so subtle that most people would miss it entirely. But Trent didn't, because when you've spent years watching fighters, years correcting stances, years studying movement under pressure, you start to recognize things that don't belong. And something about the way Bayani moved didn't belong to a man who had never trained. The mop kept moving. The room stayed quiet. But in Trent's mind, a small question had already formed. And once it did, it refused to go away. Trent didn't know why he noticed it. At first, he told himself it was nothing. Just fatigue. Just the way the mind searches for patterns when the body is tired. He looked away. Then he looked back. And this time, he watched more closely. The way Bayani pivoted when he turned, not clumsy, not reactive, but clean. Intentional. The way his feet stayed balanced, even while pushing the mop, never crossing awkwardly, never overreaching, always ready to shift weight in any direction. The way his shoulders stayed relaxed, never rising with effort, never stiffening under strain. Loose, mobile, as if tension simply didn't live there. There was economy. Nothing wasted, nothing extra, no unnecessary movement, no correction after the fact. Every motion finished exactly where it needed to be, and nowhere else. Trent felt a faint tightening in his chest. He had seen that kind of movement before, in elite fighters who no longer thought about technique because it had become part of them, in veterans who had long since stopped trying to look impressive, in people who had spent thousands of hours learning exactly how much effort was enough. But this was a janitor, cleaning mats, not warming up, not shadowboxing, not performing, just working. Trent shook his head slightly, almost amused at himself. He brushed the thought away, told himself he was over-analyzing, that a mop wasn't a weapon, that not every calm movement meant something deeper. And then, without thinking too much about it, he smiled. A casual smile. Easy. Unthreatening. He raised his hands and made a small sparring motion in the air. Playful, light-hearted, almost joking. The kind of gesture you make when you don't expect a real answer, just for fun. Bayani looked up, surprised, not startled, not defensive, just momentarily pulled out of his rhythm. He met Trent's eyes and smiled politely, the kind of smile reserved for brief, harmless exchanges. He shook his head once, small, respectful, then gestured to his uniform, to the mop still resting in his hands. A quiet, unmistakable no. He wasn't interested. Not tonight. Not like this. But Trent persisted, laughing softly, as if the refusal was part of the joke. He waved a hand dismissively, pointing toward a pair of spare gloves tucked in the corner. just one round. He mouthed, "No pressure, no expectations, nothing serious." The tone stayed friendly, but the invitation lingered longer than it should have. Around them, the room began to change. One of the remaining members slowed his stretch. Another stopped tying his shoes. A quiet curiosity rippled through the space. Someone reached for their phone, not fully committing, just enough to be ready. Bayani hesitated. The mop was still in his grip. The floor beneath him half cleaned. For a moment, he stood perfectly still, as if weighing something no one else could see. Then he sighed. Not in annoyance, not in frustration, just a long, measured breath. He lowered the mop slowly, leaning it carefully against the wall, making sure it wouldn't fall. The movement was deliberate, controlled, final. And in that instant, something changed. Not in the room. In him. It wasn't dramatic. There was no sudden music cue, no audience reaction, no change in lighting, no flexing, no bravado, no speech meant to impress. Just a shift. So subtle that at first it almost felt imagined. The tired shuffle disappeared. Not all at once, but unmistakably. His steps became deliberate, measured, placed with intention rather than habit. The slight forward slump of a man finishing a long shift straightened. His spine aligned naturally. His head lifted not proudly, not defiantly, just correctly. Purpose. He crossed the room without rushing, each step landing where it needed to land. No extra noise, no wasted motion. When he picked up the gloves, there was no hesitation, no fumbling, no searching for the opening. He slid them on with quiet familiarity, as if his hands already knew the shape. Adjusted the straps without looking, tightened them just enough, not too loose, not too tight. He rolled his shoulders once, slow and controlled, listening to his body. Turned his neck gently, left, right, then centered. Nothing exaggerated, nothing performative, just preparation. Across the mat, Trent felt something tighten in his chest. His smile faded, not suddenly, but naturally as realization began to settle in. This wasn't someone trying something new. This wasn't curiosity. This wasn't courage. This was familiarity. This was someone returning to something he already knew. They stepped onto the mat, and the room somehow felt smaller. Trent bounced lightly on his toes, loose, comfortable. The familiar rhythm of sparring settled in the gentle rise and fall of his stance, the quiet confidence that came from years of repetition. Relaxed, in control. He flicked out a playful jab. Not committed, just enough to test distance. Then another. A small combination followed, simple, clean, instinctive. Basics, fundamentals. Nothing serious, the kind of opening you use when you expect nothing unexpected. Bayani didn't retreat. He didn't step back, didn't raise his guard in panic, didn't flinch. Instead, his head moved just inches, barely enough to avoid contact. A subtle slip, efficient, almost lazy in its precision. Trent felt a flicker of surprise, but the motion carried him forward. The kick came next, chambered cleanly, delivered with control. Bayani checked it effortlessly, shin meeting shin with a dull, solid thud that echoed in the quiet gym. And then, before Trent could reset his stance, before his weight fully returned, a jab snapped his head back. Not heavy, not reckless, clean, fast, perfectly timed. The glove touched his face and was already gone, returning to guard as if it had never been there. The gym went silent. No voices, no movement. Even the fluorescent lights seemed louder now. Trent blinked, resetting his footing. His expression changed. The easy smile disappeared, replaced by focus, by calculation. This wasn't a joke anymore, and everyone watching knew it. Trent pressed forward. Not playfully now, not casually. This was real sparring. His stance tightened, his guard came up, his eyes sharpened. Real combinations now layered attacks built from years of experience, angles created and abandoned, feints designed to draw reactions, subtle shifts in rhythm meant to force mistakes. This was the version of Trent his students rarely saw, the competitor, the technician. Bayani moved like water, not rushing, not retreating, flowing. Every strike met with the correct response, not a block when a slip was better, not a retreat when a step inside removed the danger. Every opening closed before it fully existed. When Trent jabbed, Bayani was already offline. When he threw to the body, an elbow was waiting. When he tried to angle out, Bayani was there first, not chasing, just arriving. No wasted motion, no visible effort, no panic, only control. The kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind you only recognize when it's too late. Trent's breathing quickened. Frustration crept in, not emotional, but technical. The worst kind. So he reached for something familiar, something trusted. His signature spinning back kick. He'd landed it in competition, ended rounds with it, won matches because of it. The setup was clean, the timing right. He turned, and Bayani caught it. One hand secured the ankle, firm, certain. The other guided the knee, not yanking, not forcing, just redirecting. A sweep followed. Smooth, balanced, inevitable. Trent went down, not slammed, not thrown. Guided. He hit the mat gently, almost respectfully. For a split second, no one breathed. Then the gym erupted in gasps, sharp inhales, whispers, a low whistle from somewhere near the wall. Phones were raised higher now, because everyone understood what they had just seen. That wasn't luck. That wasn't strength. That was mastery. They stood. No words were exchanged at first, no celebration, no explanations, just stillness. Trent took a step back, his breathing heavy now, not just from exertion but from understanding. Then he bowed, not casually, not as habit, deep, deliberate, the kind of bow that comes from humility, from recognition, from a lesson learned the hard way. Bayani returned it, smoothly, naturally. No arrogance, no smile of victory, just respect. The kind exchanged between people who understand exactly what just happened and why it mattered. Someone finally broke the silence. A quiet question, almost hesitant. "Who are you?" Bayani didn't answer right away. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and scrolled slowly, deliberately until he found what he was looking for. Then he turned the screen. A photo. A podium. Bright lights. A younger Bayani standing tall. A gold medal resting against his chest. A Philippine national team uniform crisp. Unmistakable. The caption beneath it told the rest of the story. 3-time Southeast Asian Games champion. Former professional fighter. The room froze. Silence returned thicker now, heavier. Phones came out. Not out of curiosity anymore, but confirmation. Old footage surfaced. Fight clips. Articles, highlights from a career most of them had never heard of. The quiet janitor in the corner was suddenly everywhere on their screens. The man they'd walked past for years had a history that filled arenas. The janitor wasn't invisible anymore, but Bayani didn't change. He locked his phone, slid it back into his pocket, and waited. Bayani thanked them, not loudly, not formally, just a small nod, a few soft words spoken without ceremony. He removed the gloves carefully, setting them down where he'd found them, the Velcro peeling away with a muted sound that felt louder than it should have. No victory pose, no lingering glances. He picked up his mop, the same one he had, set aside minutes earlier, the same one he'd used night after night, long before anyone cared who he was. And he went back to work. Because to Bayani, nothing had changed. The mats still needed cleaning. The floor still needed care. Tomorrow morning, students would arrive expecting order, expecting a space ready for their own growth. And Bayani believed in finishing what he started. Because champions don't always wear belts. They don't always stand on podiums. They don't always carry titles that announce who they are. Sometimes they clean the floor beneath your feet. Sometimes they work quietly, without applause, without recognition. And sometimes the greatest lessons don't come from teachers standing at the front of the room. They come from the people you walk past every day, the people you never noticed, the people whose silence hides worlds you've never imagined. Bayani pushed the mop forward, its steady rhythm returning to the room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The gym settled back into its quiet. But something had changed. Not the floor, the people. And long after the mats dried and the echoes faded, the lesson remained. Respect isn't earned by titles, greatness isn't always visible. And you never truly know who someone is until you learn to look. Everyone you meet knows something you don't. And the quietest people often carry the loudest histories.